Today we're going to talk about some really classic properties of mathematics. So when we think about our statement of inquiry being, we solve mathematical puzzles using simplification, equivalence, and logic while justifying the result. Today we are really focusing on this ending part about justifying the result. So when I say justifying the result, that's like us saying, I know I can do this because ... So what you should have done right before this is taken a look at that Canvas quiz that was just a quick 4 questions that was really asking you to just kind of investigate the properties. And the first one you came across was the commutative property. And the commutative property means we can switch the order. But you noticed that it worked on the first question and then not for the other question. And that's because the commutative property only works for adding and multiplying. So I'm going to add that to my definition here. Switch the order for adding and multiplying. So the example from the quiz, a great one, right? 5 plus 10 is the exact same thing as 10 plus 5, right? It's 15, no matter what. Then, when I think about multiplying, 2 times 7, if I think about that, right, that's 14. If I flip that order and I say 7 times 2, that's also 14. So when I think about an example that doesn't work, like on the quiz, subtraction definitely didn't work. So for example, 6 minus 17, that's negative 11. But if I switch that order and I say 17 minus 6, that's positive 11, right? 11 and negative 11 are not the same. So we would say that those are not equal. The next property is called the associative property. And that would be we can group things how we want. And again, just like the commutative property, this works for adding and multiplying. This one's a little bit harder to visualize, so let me show you what I'm talking about. So grouping in math is generally talking about parentheses, right? That's how we group things together. That's how we hold things together. So if, for example, using gems, I grouped these two things together, right? The 4 and the 6. Gems tells me I have to add those first. The associative property tells me that since this is addition, I can choose to group something else together first. Say I want to shift those parentheses over, and I'm grouping together that 2 and that 4, which is going to leave the 6 outside of the parentheses. Let me show you how this works. So according to GEMS, I do the parentheses first, 4 plus 6. And 2 plus 10 is 12. Over here, the parentheses have shifted, right? We grouped them differently. 2 plus 4 is 6. 6 plus 6 is 12. Oh, check it out. 12 equals 12. Okay, same thing is true for multiplication. But as we saw in that Canvas quiz, if you throw a minus sign somewhere in there, it does not work out so well. So when we think about the 2 most common properties in mathematics, it's the commutative property and the associative property. So these 2 are big ones. But we do have 2 other lesser known properties. And the first one is called the multiplicative identity. Ooh, that's a crazy sounding one. Say it with me, kids. Multiplicative identity. You're going to sound really smart tonight when mom or dad or stepdad or grandma, grandpa asks you, what'd you learn in math? And you go, multiplicative identity. Be like, what? And you're going to say, all it means is that when you multiply something by 1, it equals the same thing. So this one seems really, really obvious, right? But it is kind of important to note that if, for example, I take 14 times 1, it's still going to equal 14, right? If I take 65.2 and I multiply by 1, I'm still going to get 65.2. And this is kind of why we have that secret hiding 1 on some of our combining like terms problems. If I take 1 times y, that's still just a y. Okay, so last but certainly not least is the additive identity. And that means that if we add anything to 0, it's still going to be equal. Add anything to 0, and it is still going to be equal. So if you thought the multiplicative identity was a duh, Miss Powers, the additive identity is truly, truly obvious, but it is important to note. So what I mean by this is if I take 6y plus 0, that's just 6y, right? It doesn't change. If I take 0 plus 5, that's still just a 5. Okay, so what I want you to do next, I haven't asked you to do this in a video I don't think I've asked you yet this year, so this is a good chance to do it. So I want you to try these problems and just name the property shown, but I'm not going to make a separate video. I just want you to push pause right now. So you're going to push pause, and you're going to try to answer these 4. What property are you seeing? So push pause and try to give that a shot. Okay, hopefully you have paused and you have tried these. So now let's take a look at the answer. I see a 4x plus 5y, and now it's in a different order, 5y plus 4x. All that happened is we switched the order. This must be the commutative property. This next one, I see 4 plus 2 plus 8 on the inside. And now, when I look at the right-hand side, it looks like it's been regrouped, right? The 4 and the 2 are inside the parentheses, plus 8 outside. Anytime we're seeing parentheses shift around and what's within the parentheses is changing, that's got to be the associative property. Okay. And I see something here, 9 is sitting right next to these parentheses, and the parentheses has a 1 inside. That means this is saying 9 times 1, and sure enough, that's still equal to 9, so that's got to be the multiplicative identity. Okay, and last but certainly not least, I see an A, B, 2 letters sitting right next to each other must mean multiplication, right? So A times B. And on the right side, I see B, A. So again, B times A. And if I remember correctly, the commutative property works for both adding and multiplying. So this must be another commutative property.